Happy Monday, everybody, and welcome into the Gramlich and McLean podcast. We are continuing our ACC Under Review series. This is episode 3 of our ACC Under Review, overall episode 254. So if you've missed any previous episodes, there's some that you could go check out. But Mac, this has been a lot of fun. We had Florida State last week, North Carolina last week as well. If you missed those, go check them out. Even if you're a Clemson fan, it's good to keep an eye on the competition. But Mac, today we're talking Clemson. There's a lot to discuss even before we get to our special guest.
There is a little bit of, it's not breaking news anymore, but there's news. And just to peel back this curtain all the way for you guys, this episode has been done for a couple of days. We are redoing it right now. We're having to redo it because a little bit of news dropping out of Clemson, firing offensive coordinator Brandon Streeter, who, I think I do want to spend a little time on this for a second too, KG, that, people on social media, people this and that, like, it's crazy because you don't think about things. You don't think things through. Like, people are, we're so excited. Like, he's out. He's fired. He sucked. He was terrible. Like, okay, here's the deal. That guy's a Tiger. Like, he played at Clemson. Mm-hmm. He's done so much for Clemson. And you're trashing one of the guys that, you cheered for a long, long time. And so for me, it's such a delicate thing. It's such an interesting thing, especially when it's an alumni of that school. And, my biggest thoughts on Coach Streeter, because I think he's an excellent coach. I just think that maybe he was put in that position too early. I think that because he came in 2014 and worked magic with Deshaun Watson, with Will Stout, the things he did with Trevor. He's a great fundamental guy. Get it to the basics, understand what he's doing. But the play calling was what it was. And ultimately, you heard from Coach Sweeney back on Thursday night, or maybe Friday morning, wherever they released that statement, saying, here's the deal. I am responsible for this program. I have to do what's best. I have to do what's best for this program, and I'm going to do that. And, it's a tough thing. I know that was super difficult to do because I know he loves Brandon Streeter a bunch. But at the end of the day, it was a necessary thing that, after you get past that, I think Clemson fans can be very, very excited about Garrett Riley.
Yes, agreed. And before we get to the Garrett Riley of it all, let's just talk about the actual happening. Because, look, a lot of people, a lot of Clemson fans, even Mac and I talking about this, talk about Dabo Swinney. And Dabo has a lot of great qualities that have made him one of the greatest coaches in college football. Yeah. One of those qualities is loyalty. He is an extremely loyal person, and he has not had a lot of staff turnover in general. He's had the least staff turnover of maybe any college football program in America, not even just the elite one, any program.
Yeah.
And he's loyal to his guys, and his guys are loyal to him. So that is Dabo Swinney. And generally, that is a very admirable quality. Loyalty is good. But the last couple of years, when you've seen the drop-off offensively, I think he began to realize, not publicly, because publicly he's still saying we're winning 10 games, we're winning the ACC, whatever, it's fine. But Dabo is also such a competitor. You don't get to this point without being ruthlessly competitive. That I believe he understood that something had to happen. Mm-hmm. I also wonder, Mac, and we talked about this a little bit when we both found out, I don't know if he would have done this unless he had an option ready that he knew would be an upgrade, right?
Yeah.
He wasn't going to fire Streeter just to fire him.
No.
He was only going to fire him if he was able to upgrade. Mm-hmm. And that's what I think Garrett Riley is in this whole perspective. And again, it's not that it was all just Streeter. Like, you've seen issues elsewhere. But the fact that he was able to go get an up-and-coming young superstar with the Riley last name, I think that it was kind of a, one led to the other, if you will.
Yeah, and I think, what's super interesting, the timing of it all kind of maybe tipped Coach Sweeney's hand a little bit just because of waiting for the national championship. Because I remember you and I discussing, whether it was on this podcast or just offline, about what changes are we going to see? Are we going to see some staff changes? Do we see, maybe a guy get demoted or fired and things of this nature? And it didn't happen. And so in those weeks of where you expect to see it, a team season is over, you expect the next couple of days for some things to happen. And, of course, it didn't, because TCU's playing in the national championship. And so what was interesting about that to me is, I think you're exactly right. I mean, he had to be sure. He had to be certain.
Yeah, this was his guy.
Yeah,
this was
that
who
Garrett
he
was
wanted.
coming. No question. He made one phone call, and I'm things that I'm hearing is that it happened after the Natty. A lot of people think that this was done before. So
Yeah.
it sounds like to me that it was kind of like a Hail Mary call or a cold call. Hey, you want to come play? You want to come play outside? And Garrett said, maybe. Yeah, let's talk. And so that's how I've heard that it went down. Haven't talked to Coach Sweeney or anything about that, but people around the program, that sounds like what happened. And I think that's admirable of Coach. I think it's admirable of Coach Riley. Not taking a job before a game, because we've seen how abysmal that can be. And some people might think that when you look at the score and TCU only being able to score one touchdown against those guys.
Coach Riley didn't give up 65.
Well, I'm just saying, was he distracted in his
No,
play calling and things of that nature? So, it'll be fascinating. I'm sure that'll all come out one day. But, yeah, it was interesting leading into it. KG, you hit this one nail on the head, didn't you? When you heard the news, first thing you told me was, yeah, I think this is who we're going to go get.
Okay, so here's what happened. I was up in Bristol on Thursday for my basketball work with ACC Network.
You didn't even know it happened.
No, I'm literally in a production meeting, and it had just ended. It's not like I took Mac's call during the production meeting. It had just ended, and Mac's calling me. Well, Mac and I honestly talk every day about something podcast-wise, so I was like, okay, what's up, Mac? And Mac goes, did you see the news? And I had not been on Twitter, so I had not. And I'm pretty sure the tweet had just gone out. Like Mac, his sources were tight on this one. And so I'm scrolling, and I'm saying, oh my gosh, because I think the timing part of it, Mac, like the fact that we'd already gotten to January 11th, whatever day that was, it felt like nothing was going to happen. And from a lot of what Dabo Swinney had said publicly, right? Mm-hmm. We're fine. We're moving forward, whatever. So I think that was surprising. Plus the loyalty aspect and the fact that Streeter was a Clemson man and all these types of things. So after I got over my initial surprise, I think we hung up and I thought about it for a second. And then I called you back and I said, I think Clemson's going to hire Garrett Riley.
Crazy.
And I thought about tweeting it, but then I thought, I don't want to stir the pot. I don't want to do this. Like, what if, blah, blah, blah. I don't want to be that person. I hate that kind of Twitter world where people are getting mad at you for no reason, whatever.
Sure.
But then I saw the news and I thought, yes, this is a great hire, because it had to be someone where it was an upgrade, right? It was a step up to become the OC. Clemson's a great job, but you're not going to see, like Cliff Kingsbury, for example. People were throwing that out there. That would not be a step up for Cliff Kingsbury. This guy has all the money in the world.
Also, I don't know if you
NFL.
want him. I don't know if you want him. Just
and I don't think Cliff wants to come to Clemson. Like, I think Cliff is a big city man. Except besides Lubbock. I saw a tweet that and I hope this wasn't fake, he booked a one-way ticket to Thailand and is not returning anybody's calls about coaching. So,
there you go.
You know which places are very different, Mac? Clemson and Thailand. Okay,
just a little bit.
Cliff is off to Thailand. And what I found out later, by the way, when I called Mac and said Garrett Riley, Mac lied to my face. He knew it was Garrett Riley.
Hey.
Because Mac has sources. But he didn't tell me. And he was like, oh, no. And he threw me off the scent, which I thought was hilarious. But anyway, Mac, crazy situation here. I think this is an upgrade for Clemson and what they needed to do. What can we expect, do you think, from a Garrett Riley offense?
A lot of expectation. From Jump Street, I think that there was a lot of articles that were already written, and I kind of tweeted this out. I said, hey, Clemson, hold on to those receipts. Bring those back up come September when we start playing football, because so many people just, kind of discrediting and discounting the Tigers. And, I mean, I guess maybe that makes sense if you don't make any changes and you think how much natural progression can there, really be? How much growth can we truly see? But I think that's a little foolish, too. You're going to see a quarterback starting as the guy for a whole offseason and then for the foreseeable future. So I think that was a little bit silly. But now that you've got a guy that, man, what he did for TCU, what he did for Max Duggan, a guy that wasn't even the starter going into the season to end up as a Heisman finalist, who I voted as the Heisman. I mean, look out. I think there's going to be some really fun things that happen at Clemson. You look at what he's been able to do. He is a run first, second, third guy.
Yes.
And then let's be explosive. KG's favorite thing. You got to have those explosive plays. They are going to push the ball downfield. That's just what we've seen from Riley. That's what we've seen from his brother. That's the tree that he comes from. It's going to be power air raid at the end of the day. And I'm excited to see that, especially with, having a young quarterback, having a stallion in the backfield too, actually, with Shipley and Maffa, and then some young cats that maybe are ready quicker than not to play. It's going to be good. It's going to be good. I'm excited to see it. The interesting thing for me, KG, is just how much control does he have? Because he's going to make over $2 million in 23. I don't think you're paying a guy $2 million to come in and say, hey, just kind of tweak what we're doing. Sure. Just kind of take some plays out, add some. I think it's his. That just makes sense to me. If you're going to make a move this drastic that sends shockwaves through college football, you've got to give him the keys to the car, and you've got to fill it up with premium. Like, let's go. Let's get it going. And so, to me, I think that's what we're going to see. And just a sample of that. What did TCU do this year? 450 passing attempts, 560 rushing attempts. That's balance. That's explosion. They, as a team, averaged over 5 yards a rush. Their number one guy averaged over 6 yards a rush. Passing through the air, they're going 10 yards a clip. That's what you have to see. That's the style of football that Clemson was able to do during this dynastic run. Shout out Jordan Cornette for the word. And I think that they get back to that. There's a lot of excitement. I know I'm a homer. I know you see this helmet behind me, and same for you, but I might be at every spring ball practice. We'll see. If they let me, I might be there.
Sure. And I think Garrett Riley's track record really attracted Dabo because there's nothing gimmicky about what Garrett Riley was doing at TCU. No. When you run the ball 100 more times than you pass it,
right,
that's sustainable. And especially at Clemson, when you have the kind of running backs that you currently have and the running backs that you've always had, that's something that can work. It's not the same as when Clemson went and hired Chad Morris, even though there are some similarities because you went out and got an outside mind and it changed your program.
Guy from Texas. What the heck?
And a guy from Texas. That's a good point. But in the end, Chad Morris's offense was hard on your defense. And so were you going to be able to win a natty with that offense? Probably not. And so you had to eventually make some tweaks. And now you have just a different level of talent, even though the wide receivers back in that day were pretty good too. But I think the balance is going to be really, really important. And honestly, what people like when you think of Lincoln Riley, I know they're different guys, but they're also brothers and they come from the same coaching tree. People do not talk about enough how much Lincoln Riley runs the ball, specifically how much he ran it at Oklahoma. Yeah. So you need that balance and running it with your quarterback, which we obviously saw with Duggan. And I think we'll see that with Klubnik as well in this new Garrett Riley offense.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. And you bring up the quarterback runs and the things that they're doing there. He had his first two guys who one kind of separate. I'd love to see a little bit more. Like if we saw, like 150 plus from Ship in regards to carries, we saw 135, 140 from Maffa, and then 100 plus from your quarterback in Cade Klubnik. I think that's where you want to be. That's the sweet spot. If you can figure that out, have kind of that split carry where guys are still staying fresh. You still have a major threat at the quarterback position. You have to respect it. Those safeties start creeping up. That's when you go over the top. And we saw that big play capability. Who's going to step up for Clemson in that aspect? We'll find out. Our guest actually today, our Rock'em Sox guest, Don Munson. Let's not forget what this episode is about. He gets after it. He tells us, he pulls back some insight, really jumps into that question, KG. I love that you asked it. And it was just a fun interview with Don to kind of recap the Tigers' 22 season.
And we will preface this by saying we interviewed Don before this all happened.
Don did text us. He said, hey, do you want to redo the interview? We're just like, no, Don, we took enough of your time. We don't want to do that.
And Don was great. And I think a lot of it is still it's all completely fine.
Absolutely.
We didn't really talk about Streeter at all. We just talked about Klubnik and the guys on this offense and the growth. So I think you'll see that. And let's remember, Mac, but except for the last couple of years, in Clemson's dynastic run, QB run was always very important. And now you have a guy in Klubnik that's capable.
That's right.
I would like to see him put on a little more weight in the offseason. I think a lot of people would like to see that. But, in the end, he can have a similar build to Deshaun, I think, and everything will be fine with that QB run.
That's right.
But you mentioned our Rock'em Sox guest. It is Donald Munson, and our wonderful partner is Rock'em Sox. We've teamed up with them, the world's largest sock store. Shop from over 10,000 plus exclusive sock designs, including your favorite college football teams. They have every ACC school and every school ever. Pro sports teams. Entertainment properties, the superhero dudes, all that stuff. And Mac, we're doing some awesome giveaways on Twitter that have been lit.
Can I just say the disrespect of, we're not even calling them Marvel anymore. We're just saying the
superhero guys. They wear the tights and they fly.
You're the best. You're the best. I love it. Yes, we're giving away socks, guys. Every single episode we've been doing it. Those are the ones that we'll be giving away this week. The Clemson Tiger socks. KG just, she has socks everywhere in her office.
I do.
So she had those.
I also have a little bit of these, but these are for our guests.
That's right.
If you guys are like, look, we love Kelly Mack so much, which we'd understand. If you want them to sell these socks, you can tweet at them. They probably won't. They're for our guests. You probably really want these socks, and we understand that. Sorry, continue, Mac.
It was just a bucket list item to get our face and logo on a sock, and shout out to Rockham for making that happen. Our boy Connor got it done quickly.
Dreams do come true.
That's right. I can die peacefully in a happy man now. I have a sock that has my face on it. But we're giving these away. It's been awesome feedback from you guys. It's been awesome interaction. We've been able to hook up a bunch of different fans with their school socks. So Clemson, right now, check it out. It's on Twitter. Go retweet, follow, get in that thing, and get your chance for some socks here. But if you don't win, I have good news, KG. You can go to rock'emsocks.com, GML20. We're going to give you 20% off your first order. Get as many socks as you can, 20% on us. You're going to love that. You're going to love the socks, and who knows, maybe that's your new lucky sock for your team.
Ooh, I like that, Mac. Yes, go to @EricMacLane on Twitter. Make sure you're following us at Kelly Graham. Enter to win here. Maybe you also have a relative who's a UNC fan. You can enter to win there. All you have to do is retweet and go to rock'emsocks.com. Get it done. Our Rock'em Socks guest of the week. It's finally time to talk to Don Munson. Donald Munson, welcome into the program. This is so fun to have you on. You know us well. You've known us forever. I want to start with this question. What were your first impressions, if you can think back, the first time you met Eric McLean back in 2011, and then the first time you met me? Can you think back? Do you have any memories of that?
Well, let me start with Mac. Let me start there.
You probably remember Mac more, and I understand.
Yeah, so Mac at that time, I got to understand at that time I was actually working on Sweeney's staff. Okay, so I was on Coach Sweeney's staff as part of his support staff. So the first time I met Mac, he comes strutting in as the freshman tight end. He was going to be the next superstar at tight end in the Atlantic Coast Conference. And then what was funny, and he was great as a freshman. Actually, Mac was great his entire time here at Clemson. There was never a bad moment with Mac. Well, there was the bad moment was when they want to move him to offensive line. He did not want to move to offensive line.
Wasn't fun.
Did not want to go. Did not want to put on the extra weight. Wanted nothing to do with offensive line. And then look what had happened to him. He goes to the ACC media days, talked himself into. Nobody even knew who he was at media days, and then talked him into an all ACC preseason appearance. It was awesome.
That sounds like that.
So then lived up to that. So that's the one thing. That's the one thing I will say about Mac. Now for you, Kelly, obviously my first meeting was at time I would do women's basketball games on radio and then also a little bit on streaming service, and so that was our first foray together. I still have a picture of you, and I'm trying to think who your teammate was on my phone. That was from breast cancer awareness game where you're in the pink uniform.
Yes, I think that was Chancey. I
think you're right. I think it was. So I have that picture. I actually took that picture of the two of you, sent it over to our social media department, and they used it that day for our social media.
Good looking
service.
out, Don.
So that was my first foray. And then obviously, after you graduate, you're a grad student here at Clemson. You and I start doing some basketball games together. Mac, the greatest I ever got Kelly was we're in Tallahassee at Florida State. And we've been doing 2 or 3 years maybe of a little bit of basketball games
of
together.
radio, yeah.
And I kept telling Kelly, I said, Kelly, at some point in time, you're going to have to do play-by-play. Kind of like you moving the tight end. She wanted no part of it. No.
I was like, no.
So we go to Tallahassee, and we're playing Florida State, obviously. And 2 minutes before we go on air, I just turned and looked there and said, oh, by the way, today you're doing second quarter and fourth quarter play-by-play, and I'm switching over and just doing commentary. And she looked at me like I had, bats coming out of my head or out of my ears or something like that. Bats in the belfry were being released. But she did it. So grandma was listening at the time, so grandma was out there listening. Mom and dad were out there listening. So we kind of threw her to the wolves, but it's paid off. And so, but my life, and I'm not just saying this, my life has been made better because of the two of you. I want you to know that. I want you to understand how much I appreciate the both of you, how much I respect the both of you. Yes, I realize that I'm way older than the both of you combined, probably. But you two have been just great lights in my life. I mean, just wonderful human beings to know and have friendship with.
Well, we appreciate you, brother, and some fun stories to peel back that curtain, for a lot of people, and just to, fun times. I mean, we've been around each other for quite some time and seen this journey, and appreciate you being a part of that. But now we're jumping into this thing. ACC under review. It's all about the Tigers. So who else would we go to but the voice of the Tigers? And Don, I always love when I hear you doing interviews or talking to other people for maybe the first time. You tell them, hey, look, I have the best job in the world, and what I do and the people I get to be around. And I think we all certainly can agree with that. But let's look at these Tigers from a big view, 10,000-foot view real quick. 11 wins, back to being ACC champs, playing in an Orange Bowl. Just give us your thoughts on the overall season here.
Well, one thing, I'm not the voice of the Tigers. Jim Phillips will always be the voice of the Tigers.
There you go.
I just occupy the play-by-play chair. Okay, I'm just saying that. 35 years, the man was here. He's the legend. He is the voice of the Clemson Tigers. So that will always be the case. Looking at it from 60,000 feet, this past year, I think, were there disappointments? Absolutely, there were disappointments, but there were more positives than there were disappointments. And unfortunately, we as a society, particularly if you get caught up in the social media world, what happens is that you hear all the clamor, and it's the negative, and it's not the positive. But you're right, Mac. I mean, this is a team that won the ACC. For the last time ever, they won the Atlantic Division. So they'll always have that Atlantic Division trophy that will be with them in their trophy space. That they'll never be able to take that away. They won the last one. Now, Coach Sweeney, as you know, always says they remember November. And that people are going to remember November. They are, and for unfortunate, situations. They're going to remember what happened in November. There were some losses there that, typically Clemson has not had in the past. And the way that it happened, certainly first and foremost at Notre Dame, let's be really honest with you. They just got run over. Notre Dame came right out, lined up, and just ran right at Clemson and ran flat over them. Just punched them right in the mouth, and there was nothing that Clemson could do about it. Now, everybody can't do what Notre Dame was able to do. Notre Dame brought in extra offensive linemen. They also brought in extra tight ends, and they were just going to run power. And so but that's the makeup of their team. That's what they can do, and that's who they are. Then, the loss to South Carolina stuck in everybody's craw. It's going to stick in everybody's craw. All right, Clemson fans believe that streak should already be at 8 because it was all canceled last year.
That's right.
COVID,
That's
all right.
right.
So people already think that it should be at 8. So and now South Carolina has bragging rights, and they're going to have that for 365, 24/7 until Clemson can go do something about it and go take it away from them end of November here in 2023. But for right now, you just got to live with it, and that's part of life. Sometimes you just have to live with the bad, and if you're a Clemson fan, that's living with the bad. All right, the ACC championship was great because they came out, took it right to North Carolina. It was the emergence, certainly, of Cade Klubnik. From that standpoint, I think that if you're a Clemson football fan, you're excited about what the future of this young man is going to be at quarterback. Then the Orange Bowl happens, and you're a little bit, you move the ball up and down the field, and you get 34 first downs, and you're kind of throwing it all over the place. You're not running it near as well, though, maybe as you should, but that's kind of who Tennessee was. So I think what happens is that you had a couple of outliers also that happened there in those last few games. All right, so let's go back to the South Carolina game. Clemson throws for 200, runs for 200. They'd lost one game when they'd run for 200 yards in Coach Sweeney's career. That was 2009, an ACC championship game in Tampa against Georgia Tech. Neither team punted. CJ, the man right behind me, was MVP, the only MVP on a losing team as far from that's concerned. So it was an outlier. But then you had it happen again against Tennessee. Outliers happen. usually Clemson has more first downs than the opponent, like 93, 95% of the time under Coach Sweeney, Clemson's going to win that game. And it didn't happen that way. So I think that's what has people feeling uneasy. But let me tell you, they got some dudes that were their own portal, all right? They were guys that could have jumped, but actually, as Sweeney said, it was the inside portal that came back. Those of us that were in the program knew that was going to be happening weeks in advance from that standpoint. So I think with everybody coming back, the additions now, we've got, 15, I think, young freshmen that are here on campus and beginning to work. So basically, this whole January going through spring ball is like a redshirt year for them. By the time they get to August, they should be really ready to go. So I'm pretty excited about what's going to happen for Clemson football coming up here in 2023. And the fact that Florida State is better helps the league. It helps Clemson and it helps the league.
Agreed.
Absolutely.
1,000%. We released our FSU episode last week, and yes, completely agree. And Jeff Culhane, who's the play-by-play there, he said, we were talking about kind of the hype going into next year, and he said, look, the hype is there, but you got to beat Clemson. So Florida State, of course, still dealing with that, and that's number one on their list. Don, I think that was a great overall breakdown. Let's talk about the DJ Cade situation. You had eyes on the situation from the very beginning when Cade enrolled last January. Was it handled like you expected it to be? Did it go like you expected it to go?
Yeah, I think that the way that it was handled between the two of them and the way that Coach Sweeney, Brandon Streeter, the offensive staff handled it was the way that you would hope they would always be handled at every school. And again, I realize I'm wearing orange-colored glasses and looking at it from that situation. But let's go back. All right, so everybody, let's go back to the Notre Dame game in which DJ threw for 435 or whatever it was.
Set records.
Set record, all-time record for an opponent in that stadium. So let's go back to that game. Understand the pieces of the puzzle now that were around DJ in that game compared to what he's had really the last couple of years. And that's not comparing apples to apples. That's comparing apples to oranges. I mean, right beside him in the backfield, arguably the greatest player in ACC history in Travis Etienne.
Right.
I mean, people will say, well, what about Deshaun? What about Trevor? I understand those two guys were here, and I understand that one of them was the number one overall pick. Don't get me wrong. But what Travis Etienne did and what he was able to do here at Clemson, I mean, the dude scored 468 points as a running back. He's the only guy in league play over 400 points. Everybody else is a kicker. Right? Nothing against kickers.
Numbers
everybody
don't
else
lie.
is a kicker. All right. And then that's one. And then he only touched the ball more than 21 times in his career. I think 3 times.
It's crazy.
And it was crazy. Imagine if he had been at Wisconsin or something. And then he ended up at Clemson as a guy that never came to campus. And we had to go get him because we were losing a running back. And there was this guy to be picked as a 3-star out of the state of Louisiana. And we got him. And somehow that's the way sometimes it just happens. But pieces of the puzzle, there was Cornell Powell was also on the field with DJ for that ball game. Amari Rogers, who both those guys played in the league. The offensive line, you take a look at the offensive line that was in front of him. It was all different than what it has been at Clemson. So that's part of it. Some of it was DJ's fault. And he'll admit to that. Some of it was DJ's fault. But not all of it is on DJ. But because he's a quarterback, all of it's going to get heaped upon him. All right, so now let's flip to what Cade has done. Cade so far came out, obviously, huge splash at Georgia Tech to start the season. Remember the game, the drive that he had, and he just went right downfield, got him into the end zone, and bang, 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 everybody was looking all right. The national media, hey, it's on now. They were all talking about it in August, but now it's really on. The quarterback controversy at Clemson is on. And obviously it didn't play out that way till the end of the season. And then he comes out and has the ACC championship game, and you see what happens. But he also had the Orange Bowl, and you see what happens when you run a freshman quarterback out there and just made some mistakes. So he's got some growing to do. But, Coach Sweeney, ever being the positive guy that he is, he claims that Cade is the most talented quarterback that he's ever had on this Clemson campus. All right, now think about who we've had, all right? If that is true, then that's going to be scary because the quarterback certainly, not only in the collegiate game, the professional game, but particularly in the collegiate game, he determines so much of the success of your program. And Cade is a guy that's is going to be able to do that not only behind center, but also in front of camera, in front of people, as a face of the program. Klubnik has it all and is going to handle that situation, I think, really well.
Yeah, man, it's going to be fun to see, just to see the opportunities that he did get and when he went in, and to see how he handled adversity. And a lot of those things that you said in the Orange Bowl, that that there were freshman mistakes, but there were also things that he did that I don't think many people could do. The pressure that he avoided, the throws that he made, the decisions that he made when things were firing on all cylinders, it was impressive to see. So I don't think there's any question the future extremely bright for Clemson and for Cade Klubnik. Let's look at a guy in Will Shipley who, man, since he stepped on campus, I mean, everyone has raved about his leadership ability. Everyone raved about there's just something a little bit different about that guy. Then we saw the play kind of match that this season. Don, what kind of things did you see from Will, just that he got better at, that maybe you expected a little later, but just the things that he did that separated him even more this season?
I think the biggest thing that Shipley got better at as the season went along was handling his emotions. There were times where he just got frustrated, and it affected his game. I mean, Eric, you've been there as a young player. You know what I'm talking about. Sometimes you let your emotions play way too much in it. And there was some of that, I think, this year for Shipley. Now, Shipley's not ETN. He's not a guy that every time that he touches the ball, you just hold your breath and see what's going to happen. But Shipley is a guy that, he can break off those 12, 18, 26-yard runs. He obviously broke one for, 50-something as well. So he does have it, but he's going to have wide open spaces to be able to score. So he's not a guy that has, strikeability, is what I would say, every time he touches the ball, but certainly he's a guy that knows how to get into the end zone. Clemson's got to use him more. Clemson's got to give him the football more, to be perfectly honest with you. And I think that the offensive staff has realized that. Brandon Streeter came out of the Orange Bowl, what people asked him about that, and he said, in retrospect, probably in the first half, I should have given him the ball more. So that's a growing point for Brandon Streeter. It's also, I think, a positive sign for Shipley. And it's not just Shipley, it's also Maffa that is there in the backfield with him. So right now, man, what we have seen transpire, in football, and particularly in college and professional football, what used to be one dominant guy isn't that way anymore. Carries are getting broken up. If you run it 35 times a game, chances are one guy's running it at 18, the other guy's running it at 17. So I think the two-back combination for Clemson is going to, in the end, pan out pretty well for them.
Agreed. And they're both a little different, which is what you want in your backs, definitely. And it's better for the student athletes, so you don't get run down like some of those Wisconsin guys who carry the ball 40 times a game. Don, a hot topic that we have seen has been the wide receivers and their play and their performances and, some of the injury bugs and things like that. Give us a rundown of how you feel like the wide receivers performed this year, and then maybe flip it ahead, and who do you think are going to be the main targets for Cade next year?
I would say that the wide receivers here at Clemson this year were good. They weren't great. We're used to seeing great. Matter of fact, we're used to seeing beyond great. We're used to seeing spectacular.
The best.
Yeah,
Right.
Spectacular. But they were good. Certainly the way that Antonio Williams came out in his freshman campaign performed, that's something to certainly build upon. You go back, and if you compare it, you can't compare him to a Nuke Hopkins, but I think people will probably compare him because, Nuke's first year in 2010, he was kind of just a rough diamond. It was still, kind of over in the grinder, getting shined up and getting all the nooks and crannies and bad stuff taken off of him as he started to go through his Clemson career. Mike Williams was even a guy. Mike's first 2 years here at Clemson were okay, but they weren't startling. Obviously his junior year gets hurt. And then his last year here at Clemson, the national championship year, were unbelievable from that standpoint. Justin Ross, you go back and you look at Justin Ross, it really wasn't until the last 3 games of his freshman career that he made people stand up and take notice. The ACC championship game, the Cotton Bowl, and then the national championship game. He just performed unbelievably well in those. And that was where he kind of made his reputation for himself. But Clemson's got to find that guy. And they need a big wide receiver. All right, they need that. So what's the status of Joseph Ngata? People, as we're doing this, don't know. right now. What's going to happen? Is he coming back? Is he not? All right, so that's one. So Bo Collins is coming off of injury. That's a guy that through the first 4 games of the year had 5 touchdown receptions.
Yeah. Right.
And then he got hurt, and that was taken away from Clemson. So how does he play in this? How does Adam Randall play into this? How do the new freshman wide receivers also play and get into this? So we're going to have to find all of that out. What's going to happen at tight end? Because the tight end takes pressure off of the wide receivers. Backs take pressure off of wide receivers if they can catch it as well. So those are all questions that at this point I don't know that we know. Matter of fact, I know we don't know the answer to. But there has to be a couple of players at the wide receiver spot that take another step or two forward here in the spring, and then also in August as we go into the season once it opens up. That has to happen for Clemson to get back to that point where they can score consistently 40 points a game. As we've seen in the playoffs, if you can't score 40 points in a game, and I'm not just talking about this year, I mean, you just go back and look at it. If you can't score 40 points in a game, you're not going to be in the game.
Right.
And this year you had to score 66 to win. All right, you had to score 66
I don't know if you had
to. Well, obviously TCU, they were going to.
Oh, well, yeah, TCU did. Yeah. I see what you're saying.
They had to score 66. Sometimes it's just that way. If Alabama was going to beat Clemson, out there in Santa Clara, they had to score 45. Then they obviously couldn't do that. Clemson had to score 46 the first time. I guess they won
15.
Yeah, at 15 they would have had to score 46. Yeah. That's where I'm getting to. Very rarely are you going to win a playoff game where you score less than 30. Mostly you have to score better 40 or more to win it. Clemson has to find that somewhere.
Don, I'm asking this for the Clemson fans listening because I know they want to hear about one player that you didn't mention. Just because you're around the program, you probably know more. Can you tell me about Cole Turner? Tell me more about this man. Like, are we going to see his emergence next year?
Yeah, you are going to see Cole Turner's emergence, and you could see it coming on. Now, Cole he was a little bit like Hunter Renfrow, when he showed up here as Eric, hey, can you go get me some water? That was right. Matt Klain's first thing with Renfrow. He thought he was the water guy. Hunter had to look at him and said, this guy plays, right? So that's the way that kind of Cole Turner was. But Cole needs to get in the weight room, needs to pick up some weight. He's got great ball skills. He's got tremendous speed. The catch that he made there in the Orange Bowl where he made the leaping catch coming in front of the defender, that's the kind of play that I'm talking about that we're used to seeing from Clemson wide receivers. That's the kind of stuff that we're used, where 50-50 balls all of a sudden become 80-20 balls. And that's the kind of play. But hopefully Cole has that. Hopefully he stays healthy. He's a better athlete than Nolan, his older brother, which is saying something. And he's got more speed than Nolan. He's probably, Cole's probably the third fastest player on this team right now, maybe even the second fastest player on this team right now. He can pick him up and put him down.
That's tremendous. And I think, just looking at the quarterback position and understanding that position can make everyone better. That position can make everyone take steps forward. I think that's something that we're going to see next year as well. Let's look at this offensive line. Those guys showed improvement. We saw continuity. We saw guys being able to play and the same unit running out there. We also saw some young guys have to step up and get their opportunity. And looking at a guy in Blake Miller who I think is going to be very good in the years to come. How would you grade that unit in Thomas Austin leading this group for the first time?
Well, again, I think the offensive line was a little bit like the wide receivers, although they were probably, I would give them a higher grade than I would give them the wide receivers that this year at Clemson. Blake Miller being part of that. Now, he wasn't, Mitch Hyatt shows up here his freshman year, and he automatically starts at left tackle. At left tackle, he starts automatically.
Yeah,
and was brilliant for Clemson. His entire
he had a pretty good guard right beside him, telling him what to do.
He did have a pretty good guard that was right beside him. A guy that started as tight end, but was nowhere near athletic enough to play at tight end. That's for sure.
Too slow.
So, but when you take a look. Offensive lines, and Eric, you've been there. The more that you can have pieces of the puzzle together, the longer the time that they're together, the better. Usually, the more cohesive that group becomes. But it can't just be 5. it really needs to be 8 or 9 players that can do that. The thing here at Clemson has always been the cross training. Robbie Caldwell certainly embraced the cross training, guys playing center and guard, guys playing guards and tackles, all that kind of stuff. So when there was the inevitable injury, and there's always going to be the inevitable guy, 2 or 3, that goes down during the season. That's going to happen. Make sure that you can plug somebody in that can help out. So I think that's the positive for Clemson there. Well, we'll be interested to see what happens at the center position this spring. There's been a lot of talk about Ryan Lithicum here, and that's a name that maybe even some Clemson fans, the average Clemson fans, had no idea who I'm talking about. But Lithicum was a guy that was really coming on at the end of the year, and he's a natural center. He was the number 1 center, as a matter of fact, coming out of high school. Mm-hmm. And so it'll be interesting to see, all right, if he does that move Putnam back to a guard spot? And does that move Walker Parks back out to right tackle? Do they take Miller, move him over to left tackle? All of that's going to have to be figured out and worked out, but that's what spring football is for. And then it's also a little bit about what August camp is for. And then there's some other guys behind them that are starting to push, and competition makes everybody better, particularly on an offensive line.
Speaking of competition, I remember probably the biggest piece of hype that we heard going into this season was about the defense, and it was about the D-line specifically. And I think overall, it's fair to say the defense didn't live up to those expectations. Now, were those expectations fair? I mean, that's a whole other question. But look at this defense for me, Don, kind of with an overarching view. How would you say the defense performed this season?
Well, I think the defense performed pretty well. They were still, a defensive unit that was basically, top 20 in the country. So that's not bad. You're right. The biggest thing that all of us have going against us is expectations. I mean, expectations for me, expectations for you all, going into a broadcast, going into, for your job, whatever. That's the biggest thing that you have to work against. There you are. The higher the expectations, though. So this was a group, yes, they come in that a lot of people thought, all right, this is going to be the best Clemson defense ever. That was all the words that you heard. It was going to just be a dominating force. And unfortunately, it didn't turn out that way. There was injuries that happened along the way. There were also maybe some guys that didn't perform to the level that you thought they were going to perform to. I think maybe there was some inexperience that was going on at linebacker that hurt him early on, so they did not come into play the last 5-6 games of the year. The way that Trotter was playing at the end of the year, the way that Barrett Carter was playing at the end of the year. Obviously, Trenton Simpson went down with injury, but Wade Woodaz still as a freshman linebacker into a role that he played extraordinarily. Like Keith McGuire was a guy back there that was a plug guy. You could plug in and just play, about where he wanted to. Keith now has given up the game. He's retired from football and won't be playing any more football from this point on. So there has to be some depth issues that have to be accounted for, I think, at linebacker. T.J. Dudley is a name you need to know. Was wearing number 26. We'll find out if that's the number that he shows up into next year when he shows back. I mean, he may take somebody's number that's left. Who knows what's going to happen from there. So I think that the linebacker position is really good, and obviously, the defensive front, particularly a defensive tackle now with everybody that has announced that it's coming back, is going to be really good. Defensive end will be a little bit of a question mark. But today's game, because of the spread offenses in the league, I would expect that you could see Clemson play a lot more 3-3-5 than necessarily go, 4-3, 4-3-4 from that standpoint. But there'll be a lot of adjustment. There's always been a lot of ebb and flow. Venables had it when he was here at Clemson, and certainly Coach Goodwin is doing the same thing that Brent was doing as well. There's a learning curve. There's a learning curve for Wes, from his first time ever as being a defensive coordinator. It's not easy. It's a tough job.
Yeah.
But he's a big guy. He's a grown man. He realizes the expectation, and he knows that he's got to also up his game, which I love. He's not the guys though on the defensive side of the ball love him. Just absolutely love him.
No, I don't think there's any doubt about that. Every time that we spoke with somebody, they would just rave about Wes and his leadership style and the things that he does. And although it's different is good sometimes. And certainly I think a very bright future there as well. Don, you mentioned some of those holes and you mentioned some of those things that, maybe Clemson is going to have to figure out. And we know in this era that there's a way to do that, and the transfer portal is certainly a valuable option. Coach Sweeney, hasn't really dipped his toe quite in it. I know there's a couple of, quarterbacks that have made their way over, one that has been here before, another that is obviously the Alabama relationship. But do you see that changing? Do you see that adjusting with meetings you've been in or things that you've heard Coach say that maybe we haven't, on just being able to fill some of those holes quicker with 20, 22-year-old men instead of, 17, 18-year-old kids that are coming in?
Well, he can't do it this year because he's already over the number. He's right now, as we sit here talking,
not enough guys left.
They're over the scholarship number right now. So they got to kind of figure out what to do from that standpoint. So it won't be here in 2023 that they do that. But you also, Eric, Coach, you've played for him. He is extraordinarily loyal. Just extraordinary. His deal, I'm sure he told this to your parents when in the recruiting, and he tells this to everybody. When you sign up with Clemson, it is until death do us part. All right? We're going to stay there, and we're going to make sure his most important thing for you is to go get your degree. That's the most important thing. The number one commandment of the 16 that are in the team room: go to class, be engaged. That's the number one commandment. When it gets down to playing, playing is only down there about like 4, 5, 6 that is actually on the commandment list when it gets to playing. But he also understands he's paid to win games. Coach Sweeney is paid to win games. And it's one of the reasons that he has had as much success, because he's figured out ways to win games. So if he has to go to that portal route, but he's not going to bring somebody in here that's not the right fit. The other thing he does in recruiting is that when a young kid shows up here on campus, he turns them over to the players, and let the players will come back and give the review whether or not they think that this kid is a fit or not. And that happens, almost immediately. Within 12 to 18 hours, that's going to happen. Sweeney, though, is really good to be able to just sit down with a kid, sit down with their parents, and almost within 10, 15 minutes be able to tell, is this guy a Clemson fit or not? Clemson, it's not for everybody. Nebraska, it's not for everybody. Washington, not for everybody. All right? Florida State's not for everybody. So you got to figure out those everybody's that you want here on Clemson's campus that can help you get to where you want to be, and that's winning championships. Best is the standard.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point, Don, because I think people assume, there's just an unlimited amount of scholarships and you can just go to the portal. But if you're not losing guys to the portal, or at least not a big amount, and you also have guys choosing to come back, Tyler Davis, Xavier Thomas, you don't just have unlimited spots to throw out portal invites. So that's a good reminder for listeners and fans. Okay, we've mentioned the E word, expectations. We've talked about it actually a lot on this podcast today. Let's look ahead. Let's look ahead to 2023. You mentioned Florida State and ranked higher in the final AP poll, which was interesting when you look at the head-to-head, but, whatever. You mentioned a lack of divisions. That's going to be very interesting. Where are the expectations at right now for Clemson football in 2023?
Oh, I think the expectations are to, let's be frank, they're to get back to the college football playoff. Mm-hmm. That's who Clemson is. Right now, that's the expectation, is to get back to, at least among the fan base and at least among the media, that's the expectation. Again, I'll go back to what William Christopher Sweeney, preaches, is that he doesn't preach that. He just doesn't preach that. His goal is to win the opener. After that, it'll be win the division. Then it'll be win the state championship. Then it'll be win the ACC championship. Then it's win the last game, wherever that may be, because he does not control the committee who's being picked. He readily admits we could be 12-0, 13-0 at the end of the year and still not go to the playoffs, and he's absolutely right. He's absolutely correct when he says that. Now, people just kind of shrug that off, but he's absolutely correct when he does say that. So, but the expectation is, playing the football play. Let's go to the playoffs. Let's get back. Let's get an opportunity, win a semifinal game, go give us an opportunity to go win another national championship. Believe me,
Yeah.
that's the expectations here at Clemson, and it will continue to be the expectations here at Clemson for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, they set the standard really high, and there's good and bad things about that, but I don't think there's any question that that's where Clemson expects to be, and I think they've got a good shot at it. The division, the conference as a whole is exceptional next year, and they're going to have a shot. They're going to have a really good shot to do it. Don, this was so much fun. Thanks for joining us, brother. Really appreciate you helping us break down Clemson.
Well, again, appreciate the both of you more than you will ever know, or more than words can express. Love you both. You all have. I love to watch you all success. Believe me, as an older guy, watching you all succeed. Kelly, cannot wait to meet your firstborn. Just cannot wait for that to happen, and so looking forward to that. So have a great time with your pregnancy. Hope that everything goes well.
It's so fun.
Max already got some little ones that are running around and
right.
that are out there and stuff. So, but hey, God bless you both. God's been good to all three of us, and He will continue to be good to all three of us. I think you know what my faith is. That's where my anchor holds from that standpoint. It's a privilege to be the play-by-play guy here at Clemson. I do have the best job on campus. Part of that, though, is because I have great people to work with, just like the two of you, and that's what makes it so much fun.
Thanks again to Don Munson for joining us, and for the life-size poster of CJ Spiller in the background. I felt like he was watching us the whole time. CJ's a great guy, so no issue with that, but it's very life-size. My main takeaways from our chat with Don, a lot of different things. I thought his kind of 10,000-foot view was really good, talking about the positives, but also some of the things that were disappointing, not just for the program, but for the fans. And anytime you lose to South Carolina, that is not good. That is a problem. And that is something that Dabo hates, and probably the thing that is eating him up perhaps the most in this offseason. But I liked when Don said Will Shipley needs more touches. We've been saying that forever and ever. Don Munson said it, so maybe it'll get up the food chain. I remember, speaking of the life-size CJ, they used to have a tracker so that CJ would get his touches. You might need to do that for Will Shipley, Matt.
Well, here's the negative with that. The person, if you remember, that was doing the tracking was Will Sweeney.
Dabo's
He's moved
son,
on.
yeah.
He's out of there.
Can we
the other two
hire
are on
him
the
for
team.
Saturdays? So
Actually, that's a good point. He is available. So let's bring him back. Let's get that done, because I agree with Don. We have to ship the ball. What are you doing? You look at the Orange Bowl, 3 touches in the first half.
Mm-hmm.
Not ideal. But the coaches, again, admittedly said they have to figure that out, understand in the moment, doing what you got to do. The other thing that I really like what Don said is kind of his analysis on the wide receiver position, and the fact that, for as long as we had been there, the wide receiver room for Clemson had just been the best. It'd been the standard. That's why Clemson was able to call themselves wide receiver U, and still can when you look at the guys who are in the NFL. But that position has taken a step back. And what I'm really intrigued, KG, to see, because I don't think the argument has necessarily been answered yet, and maybe it will next year, is how much of that was affected because of the quarterback position. How much will change because you have a guy that can, number one, go through 4 reads and get anybody the ball, but number 2, throw the ball where guys can catch it, get it on time, anticipate things being open. That's what I'm fascinated to see. Are we going to see that room take a substantial jump simply because of who's throwing the ball? Not even to put in all the work that they're going to put in, the age, getting older, more experience, figuring that thing out, really being able to take that next step. How much of that is going to be just simply because of the quarterback position? Fascinated to see that, and ultimately, I think that's going to be the ticket, for Clemson getting back to the playoff.
Definitely. That'll be the ticket. And, can Cade Klubnik look more like UNC Cade instead of Tennessee Cade? Sure. That is going to be a big question too. But and can these wide receivers stay healthy? That's always a concern. It's so funny too for Clemson fans, because you watch Clemson on Saturday, then you watch the NFL on Sunday, and you see Mike Williams, and you see T. Higgins, and you see these guys, Renfro, who are some of the best wide receivers in the league, Nuke, and you wonder where they all went. So we'll see if Clemson can get that remedied next year.
They'll figure it out. But that was fun. Another great episode, number 3 of ACC Under Review. Got a loaded week. 2 more episodes. You're not going to want to miss them. Don't miss the sock giveaway either now. Go check it out on Twitter. You want to jump in there.
By the way, we're doing one for each school. So make sure Get in there, retweet if you want to win Clemson socks. If you're like, hey, I have my father-in-law's a Tar Heel, I can go retweet the Tar Heel ones. Do that.
That's true. Get in there, get some socks, and also use our code GML, 20% off. If you do not win, not all hope is lost. Check it out there. But that's it for us. Thank you guys for tuning in. Another great episode of Gramlich and Mac Lane. If you're watching us on YouTube, mash that subscribe button. We need you guys to keep those numbers going up. It's been really cool to see this thing grow. It's been an awesome decision for us to be able to just be on another platform for you guys. But we also need you to go over to Apple Podcasts, rate, review, subscribe on there. We always appreciate that. But until next time, we'll see y'all.